everyone, and welcome back to my videos about English literature. As you may know by now, my intention is to give you a modern interpretation of the classics and to get back to the real meaning of these works. And so today I would like to ask you to make a little effort. So I dare you. Are you able to think about Frankenstein without being influenced, not even for an instant, by movies, by different drawings or cartoons or anything else? Would you be able to do that? Would you be able to come with me to visit the real novel, the first real original novel that actually talked about Frankenstein, and it was written by Mary Shelley. So the original title wasn't just Frankenstein, it was Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. Oh, this is an interesting title. We'll get back later because it has got a very strong and important meaning. First of all, we have to remember that this work was written by Mary Shelley. She lived between the 18th and the 19th century. She was married with, probably you'll know him, with Percy B. Shelley. He was a great romantic poet, very popular at the time because his work is like a sort of an immense resume of history of art, okay, with a very new perspective at its time. So he was extremely famous and popular. Her father, Mary's father, was also very well known. He was William Godwin, a very famous philosopher, and even her mother was well known because she was one of the first feminists that we have ever known in history. So we can say that her environment, the environment she grew up in, and also the family she developed by herself, was extremely close to a very cultural and intellectual development and experience. So the way, okay, the birth of this novel, of this Gothic novel, which is Frankenstein, is quite funny actually, and it's connected to this environment we talked about, because Mary, together with her husband Percy, were guests at Lord Byron's mansion in Switzerland. It was a very rainy summer, and during these rainy summer days they got bored. And so Lord Byron suggested a sort of a literary challenge, a contest, we'd say today, you know? And so the challenge consisted in writing a horror novel or a horror story anyway. And this is how Frankenstein was born. It wasn't actually the only novel that had a very important story there, because there was also another one written by Polidori, and it was the vampire, Il Vampiro, okay? It was very famous, that it has influenced legends and histories about vampires throughout the centuries. It has also inspired and influenced Dracula, and not only, okay, all the legends we know today as well about vampires. So, back to our Frankenstein. Frankenstein was first published in 1818, but the author was unknown. The preface, a very long preface, was written by Percy B. Shelley, by Mary Shelley's husband, and the book was dedicated to her father. Then, 5 years later, this novel was published again, was republished in second edition in France, and for the first time the name of the author, so Mary Shelley, was actually mentioned. It was a very typical Gothic novel. What do we mean when we talk about Gothic novel? Gothic novel was a very popular genre at the time, okay? It was the complete opposite of some other patterns of novels, like for example the novel of Manners by Jane Austen. In fact, Jane Austen also wrote a novel which was called Northanger, in which she really criticized, using some humor, very smart humor actually, she criticized the Gothic genre, the Gothic attitude of the period, and this work wasn't absolutely well accepted by other intellectuals and other writers at the time, but we do appreciate it now, because it was something different. He criticized this Gothic period. Gothic novels had all the same aspects, or anyway, some aspects in common. First of all, we have these mysterious settings with a gloomy and very creepy atmosphere. They were set maybe in castles or cemeteries or hoods. They were always very dark. They played especially at night. Also, characters were extremely gloomy, and we can say that most of the times also a supernatural atmosphere, supernatural elements were involved. This is something different from Frankenstein, from Mary Shelley's work, because this isn't about supernatural elements. This is actually about science, which is very strange actually. Now we'll see why. So first of all, this novel was divided into epistles, and we have seen also when we talked about the rise of the novels, so the first modern novels, we said that diaries as well as epistles were also used to give some kind of realism. So basically, we are talking about a Gothic novel, so we can't talk about an illusion of realism. But Mary Shelley really wanted to be realistic as far as some topics are concerned. One especially, and this topic is responsibility. Then, now we'll see what we mean here. First of all, let's start from these epistles. They were written by a traveler, a captain of a ship, who happened to know in his life Victor Frankenstein. Victor Frankenstein was the creator of the so-called monster. I'd like to call him creature actually. So we don't have to remember that Frankenstein isn't the name of the monster, but of his creator. So please remind this, because this is still a very common and gross mistake, actually. So Victor Frankenstein, in his life, had suffered important losses in his family because of illnesses, and so he developed this interest for science, for medicine, and his dream was to create life, to actually create life from a lifeless substance, okay, for an inanimate material. And obviously that material was, we can say that there were corpses, okay. And so he created this creature, this so-called monster, this creature who is absolutely huge and ugly, but very well-tempered. He is good inside. But he has to face society. He has to face the real world. He has to face other people, other human beings. And what he gets from there, what he receives, is just violence. Okay, he can't be accepted. He has to suffer from violence and stereotypes of the world. And so, step by step, being considered evil, even if he isn't at first, then step by steps, he really becomes evil. And this is a very important moment. This is a very important step. during that time, his creator, so Victor Frankenstein, had promised him to create another creature, to create another new life, okay, a sort of a feminine creature to give him company. But then Victor considered all the consequences of his work, and so he decided to stop and not to create this other creature anymore. So the monster wanted revenge. He became extremely violent, and at the end of the novel, we find our creature, we find our monster with an absolute desire of death for himself, a great desire, wish to die, and at the same time we find him mourning, okay, mourning for the life, for the death of his own creature, despite every possible contrast and every possible terrible consequence he had suffered because of him. And at the same time, our monster, our creature, is blaming society, is blaming other human beings for his own terrible actions, because he said that he had received so much violence, he had never been accepted, and so he suffered from all these prejudices, and this is why he behaved that way. So we come to the very point of my video. We can say that the absolute message, okay, of this work is about responsibility. Two different kinds of responsibilities, actually. Now we'll see what I mean. First of all, responsibility of the scientist. We said before, we said at the very beginning, that the other part of the title, okay, was Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. When we talk about Prometheus, we get back, okay, to the classical mythology, and we know that Prometheus was the character, the figure that wanted to steal the holy fire from gods, okay, from gods, and he was then punished. He was punished for his so-called hubris. What does it mean? What is hubris? This is a Greek, an ancient Greek word, but we use it today as well. So hubris means arrogance. This arrogance of the human being to defy, who defy nature, who defy God or gods eventually, who try to overcome their own limits of human being. Okay, Prometheus wanted to steal the fire, okay, from the gods, and he was punished with a never-ending torture. We know that he had an eagle trying to eat his own liver. Why the liver? Well, he'll tell me, because the evil is always regenerating, and so this is a never-ending torture. Yes, this is true, but there is more than that. When we talked about Shakespeare, and we talked about his way to, we can say, to analyze balance and disbalance inside the world and inside the human being, we mentioned the liver as the organ that symbolically, metaphorically, obviously, controlled the instincts, okay? So Prometheus was obviously characterized by instincts, okay, by his instinct, because trying to steal the fire, okay, trying to steal the fire from gods was something that really wanted to affirm himself as something more than a human being. This is obviously all about instinct, okay? This is why this punishment. So we have so many different reincarnations of Prometheus through how the history of arts, of literature in general. We can think, for example, about Faust. Okay, Faust by Wolfgang Goethe. He was the exact reincarnation of Prometheus. His deal with devil, okay, which failed basically at the end of the work, is the attempt, okay, the human being at being something more, okay, at defying God, defying his own nature. And this is very recurring, very cyclic theme throughout history of literature. We can mention, for example, Satan again in Paradise Lost by Milton, for example. We mentioned the devil, the deal that Faust decided to make with the devil, and in this case Satan again is the incarnation, is the representation of Prometheus. We know that in Paradise Lost Satan was this angel who wanted more, and so he challenged God in this case, and then there was the fall, and the rest is history, okay? And then again, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Also in this case, our Prometheus is the Ancient Mariner. When he decides to kill the albatross, this holy, this sacred animal, he defies nature. That nature that was so important, was absolutely sacred for romantic poets. And he was, we remember, a romantic poet of the first generation, okay, together with Wordsworth too. And so he was punished. His punishment was a curse. He was cursed to go around and tell everyone, tell other human beings about the dramatic destiny of humanity. This is a terrible curse. This is a terrible punishment, actually. But also in the future, and I'm talking about the 20th century, we have other intellectuals, like for example a great playwright in Germany whose name is Bertolt Brecht. Okay, Brecht wanted to talk in his theater about this topic again. He wrote especially one work, one play. It was called in German. It was called Leben des Galilei, which is in English Life of Galileo. In this work, he talked about the life of this scientist, but he rewrote this work some different times again, changing the role that the scientist had in the story. His dignity, okay, some aspects of his character. And why? Because Brecht was absolutely influenced and shocked by what happened during his life, because he could actually see, okay, the effects of the atomic bomb. Okay, so he was absolutely shocked by this, and he had to reconsider, or anyway to consider in the first place, that consequences of science, okay, of discoveries, of inventions, may be unpredictable. And even if they're unpredictable, probably someone should care about these consequences before. And so the responsibility of the scientist comes up again. Okay, science has developed a lot, okay, throughout the centuries, but nowadays it is still often put into question, because we know that both moral and ethical borders sometimes are shattered. And this is why this theme is extremely modern, and it will always be. Because science will always be developing, but borders will always be there, will always be difficult to actually accept or overcome, or to find out where actual borders should be. Okay, so this is very interesting today as well. But I told you before that the theme of responsibility had two different aspects, two different sides. So one side is the responsibility of the scientists, we talked about this, and the other side is the responsibility of society, of other human beings, of humanity. The society Mary Shelley was talking about was the society of her time, the Victorian society, so a society that was based on appearances, on stereotypes maybe, on a very strict moral code, on patriarchal family, which was absolutely influenced by a very, very strict pattern. Okay, so this society, as I said before, wasn't ready to accept someone, not something, right? Someone different as this creature. The society wasn't able to watch behind appearances, and so they refused our creature. And this is the point, because the monster became exactly what they wanted him to be in the first place. They had considered him evil, and then he became evil. He was the mirror of what society had always wanted him to be, in order to make themselves feel better with the stereotypes they had in their minds. This is also very, very interesting. When we talked about the liver and Prometheus before, I made a reference to the video in which I was talking about Shakespeare, and I was talking about how actions and how unbalanced elements, how disbalances in the individual, in the microcosm of the human being, may mirror outside, may influence the universe, the world outside, so the macrocosm of universe. In this case, we have it from an opposite perspective. So this is an unbalanced, we have a disbalance outside in the world, in the macrocosm around, which creates a terrible disbalance, a terrible unbalance inside the individual, in this case the human being, in this case our creature. Okay, so this is the same topic basically, but from an opposite perspective. And this is very important to remember also the responsibility of society, of public opinion, of humanity, okay? Because sometimes we can say that think bad makes bad after all, okay? So they finally got exactly what they had been scared of, because they have basically created it, okay, in their minds. This is absolutely interesting. So responsibility of the scientist, responsibility of society on the other side. There is also another important element, another important aspect, that is dualism. The dualism of the individual, and we have it considering Frankenstein and his creature. So Frankenstein was basically accepted by society, so it was the socially accepted part, and his creature was the other side, okay, of the individual, the hidden side. We'll see it later when talking about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because this isn't so different after all, okay? Also, Dr. Jekyll was a scientist, and also Dr. Jekyll created his monster somehow. The only difference was that he created it and could take him out of himself. So they share the same body, even if it changes, okay? In this case, in Frankenstein's case, our scientist creates another body. But Then finally, the idea is quite similar, and it's the first glimpse, it's the first idea, the first perspective of a more important focus of the interior life of the individual. Okay, this is absolutely interesting. So we have many different ideas there, and I hope this is maybe a little different way for you to watch Frankenstein, and I hope this is interesting for you, not just for school or university or essays or whatever, but especially for yourself, in order to look at the classics with new eyes and to consider them absolutely modern as they are. So please, if you're interested in all this, subscribe my channel and contact me if you want to give me a feedback or to say something or to suggest me one topic you would like me to develop for you. So thank you very much for watching and see you very soon. Goodbye.